Mercedes furious at F1 and FIA after evidence found. So we're going to be going through that and 3 other stories in today's video. So make sure to like this video, and if you want more Mercedes news content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel by hitting that red button down below. The first story is Lewis Hamilton escapes FIA punishment as Sergio Perez upsets race stewards. Lewis Hamilton has given another slight hint regarding a possible upcoming F1 retirement, with the 38-year-old now very much in the twilight of his career with track giants Mercedes. Hamilton and his team are preparing to launch an attack on the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, following a downtrodden start during a lackluster qualifying session. On Saturday, poor qualifying performances from both Carlos Sainz and Hamilton left them in 16th and 11th respectively, and have eroded all major hopes of pulling off something special in the capital of the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, a full rundown of the 2023 prize money listings has now been revealed, breaking down what each team can expect to earning from the final standings. It is set to be another lucrative year for Hamilton and co., despite a campaign of frustration and limited success across the circuits. Next season, it has been announced that 3 teams will have to change their names next season as Alfa Romeo prepare for an emotional departure. Stay tuned with Express Sport all day, as we bring you all live action and updates from the world of F1, ahead of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Verstappen raised some eyebrows in second practice when he muscled his way past other cars in the narrow tunnel pit exit that passes under the main track at the Yas Marina circuit. While his actions were not a strict breach of the regulations, the fact that he came close to being squeezed into the wall highlighted the potential safety issue. So, in a move to prevent any repeat problems for the remainder of the Abu Dhabi weekend, F1 race director Niels Wittich has outlawed any repeat shenanigans. In revised event notes that were sent to teams on Saturday morning, Wittich said, "Overtaking is prohibited in the pit exit road unless a car slows with an obvious problem." On Friday, the most notable Verstappen moment came when he barged his way ahead of George Russell and then found his path briefly blocked by Lewis Hamilton as he came close to brushing the wall. Then, having accelerated past the lead Mercedes car, he got briefly held up by Alpine's Pierre Gasly before surging past the Alpine on the way out of the pits. While Verstappen appeared to be impatient to get rolling out of the pit lane during the interrupted second practice, he blamed rivals for triggering the drama. "I mean, they have to move," said Verstappen. "They are all driving slow, and I want to go out because we are limited on time, and they just keep on driving in the middle. Then, when I tried to pass, they tried to squeeze me in the wall. So yeah, a bit silly." Overtaking in the pit lane has become a talking point recently as the FIA has moved to try to reduce traffic problems in qualifying, with drivers now forced to stick within a maximum lap time for outlaps in qualifying. They have taken to trying to build up gaps in the pit lane exit, which has triggered further problems. In Brazil this year, the FIA allowed overtaking in the pit exit to prevent cars blocking each other, but that again caused trouble as drivers felt it was not the safest solution. The second story is Lewis Hamilton claims Mercedes can pull off F1 2024 miracle. Lewis Hamilton is confident Mercedes have fixed the problems which marred their Formula One season, but he still isn't holding his breath in anticipation of a 2024 title fight. That may prove to be a step too far with Max Verstappen so dominant this year and his Red Bull team having got a head start on their car development for next term. Mercedes have been aimless for the past 2 seasons. But 7-time world champion Hamilton is convinced that his team is finally back on the right path. "We didn't have a North Star necessarily at the beginning of the year, knowing exactly where we needed to work towards," he told motorsport.com. "And it's been kind of a zigzag line trying to get to where we need to be. Every now and then something positive happens, you're like, okay, that's it. And then it shifts, so the goalpost is always moving, which is typical. I do believe we have a North Star now, which I don't think we've had for 2 years. Still, getting there is not a straight line. There were just certain things, decisions that have been made that just left you blocked at the end of a road, and you can't do anything because of the cost cap and all these different things. If you look at the Red Bull, and they've done an amazing job, but from Bahrain last year, they had a bouncing issue and fixed it that week. It is like if you're trying to build a wall, it was one brick after the other. Brick, brick, brick. Just development, development, development. Maybe they added something and it didn't add performance, but they were still building. For us, we had to knock down the wall. We had a lot of aero on that first car last year, but we had to basically knock a ton of downforce off it and then slowly tried to add it. But every time we tried to add it, it was worse. We just didn't improve for a long time. So you can imagine Red Bull are progressing, and we're going nowhere. Then, eventually, it's slowly coming up while they're continuing. That gap. We are just on massively different trajectories, but I think we understand the car so much better now. We have developed great tools in the background, so naturally I'm hopeful, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Mercedes will need to make enormous progress over the next 12 weeks if they are to have any chance of competing with Red Bull next year. In order to try to achieve that, team principal Toto Wolff admits his team is taking an enormous risk. We are changing the concept. We are completely moving away from how we laid out the chassis, the weight distribution, the airflow, he said. I mean, literally, there's almost every component that's being changed, because only by doing that, I think we have a chance. However, he followed that up with a warning. We could get it wrong also. So, between not gaining what we expect, catching up and making a big step and competing in the front, everything is possible. Speaking about finishing second this year, Wolff added, I think we need to take it on the chin, be humble about it, and consider it a good day. Nevertheless, there's a Mount Everest to climb in order to catch up with Red Bull. I have no doubt that McLaren is going to be right in the mix next year, and maybe Aston Martin, and maybe others. Even though Lewis Hamilton's Drivers' Championship standings improved in 2023, his struggles did not. The seven-time world champion found himself struggling throughout the season, and in doing so, arrived at a certain point where he began to have doubts about himself. Hamilton, speaking about this, opened up with the BBC, "When you have difficult seasons like this, there are always going to be moments when you're like, is it me or is it the car? Do you still have it? Has it gone?" Following this, he added that whenever things go right, from the car to the spark to confidence, everything seems jovial and vice versa. Whoever denies this surely lies and believes the Mercedes ace. Admittedly, Hamilton often faced retirement questions as he struggled in recent times. However, his stance for the team to rebuild and work around it hasn't changed. 2023 marked the second year where Toto Wolff's team failed to provide Hamilton with a championship-worthy car. Even though W14 was regarded to be a better car than its predecessor W13, for the British driver, it was equally bad and disappointing. So much so that Hamilton wanted to part ways with the car as soon as possible. After losing the title on the very last lap in the 2021 Abu Dhabi GP, Lewis Hamilton promised to make a mega return and challenge Max Verstappen for the title. However, things did not look favorable for the seven-time world champion who was far away from being in a championship-worthy car. The third story is Mercedes named two Lewis Hamilton concerns as F1 team given extra work for 2024. Mercedes will address brake reliability concerns on their 2024 car after Lewis Hamilton ran the risk of failing to finish the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It was not a particularly triumphant end to the season for the seven-time world champion. Ninth place marked his worst result of the year, other than his DNF in Qatar and disqualification 2 weeks after that at the United States Grand Prix. But those 2 points were earned by gritting his teeth through 2 threats that threatened to make his evening even worse. Mercedes head of race strategy Rosie Waite confirmed as much in a debrief video released by the team. The first threat was his damaged front wing with the left end plate flapping in the wind after contact with Pierre Gasly. Mercedes opted against changing it, but, as Waite admits, they would have been forced to if it became a potential danger. These things often look worse on television than they are in reality and in the data, and, undoubtedly, it will have affected the balance and the performance of Lewis's car slightly, she said. But it was never a consideration for us to pay the cost of a pit stop of fitting a new front wing versus just continuing with it. Actually, the biggest concern for us was structural, so if it had degraded and started to become a structural concern, then that might have been a safety issue and that might have forced use to change it. We were monitoring it very closely during the race, but thankfully that never became an issue, and he could just complete the race with the wing as it was. A change of front wing in the pit lane would have cost Hamilton several vital seconds and may have led to him finishing even lower than ninth. but more threatening was the prospect of not completing the race at all thanks to problems with his brakes, which Waite said was a real worry in the late stages. Explaining the 38-year-old's apparently slower pace in the third stint, she said, "Well, actually, if you picked through the data and correct for things like the age of tires, the track condition, Lewis's performance was actually pretty similar through stint 2 and stint 3. But the race situation made it look quite different. In stint 2, Lewis was on fresh tires chasing down Fernando Alonso, whereas Fernando was on older tires and spent most of that stint in the dirty air of Oscar Piastri. That makes Fernando's performance look worse than it is in reality, and Lewis therefore looks stronger. Take stint 3, and the positions were reversed. Fernando had slightly newer tires than Lewis and fresh air, and Lewis was in the dirty air of Fernando with the older tires, and so that's why his performance doesn't look as impressive despite the lap times being quite similar."